Hi guys, it's Katie here with Life Mundane and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is one you guys have been asking for quite a while, and that is my full review on the Apologia, Who is God? Worldview Book 1. I am excited to tell you guys we finished the whole book and I'm excited to answer a lot of your frequently asked questions. So let's get started. Hi, my name is Katie and welcome to Life in the Mundane. I am a second generation homeschool mom of 6 beautiful kiddos, and on this channel we talk all things resources. I love to share with you resources that are going to help you in your homeschooling and help encourage you in your biblical parenting and how you can utilize those to their fullest potential so that you can make the most of the little moments. The first question that I get quite frequently is, what is this Worldview series and what age group is it for? So the Who is God book is the first book out of 4 books in the series. The first one is Who is God? The second one is Who am I? The third one is Who is my neighbor? And the fourth one is What can I do? Talking about biblical stewardship. All of these books together help to give our kids a very grounded biblical worldview, teaching them how they can filter all the information that they're receiving, whether it's from the news or from TV or from friends, wherever it is, or even from our own churches, helping to filter that through the lens of Scripture to truly understand what is coming from God, what is coming from a biblical worldview, and what is not. I really appreciate this curriculum, but we'll get more into that here in just a second. And as far as age group goes, this is designed for 6 to 14-year-olds. Now, I will tell you that while it is designed for 6 to 14, and it definitely can be used in a family group setting, I would highly recommend waiting until your oldest is maybe closer to that 8 or 9-year-old age. We personally did it this year: a 12-year-old, 11-year-old, 10-year-old, 9-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Obviously, the 4-year-old and 3-year-old didn't gain as much as the older kids, but they did still follow along with quite a bit of it. And like I said, you might be able to do it when your oldest is only 6, and I think a 6-year-old could glean quite a bit, but I probably would hold off until they're just a little bit older if you're talking about your oldest child. There are 10 lessons in this book, and if you follow their suggested schedule, you would read out of this book 3 days a week, and you would do so in a way that would make it where one lesson would last you about a 2-week time frame. So it can take you all year long. We'll talk more about how we use it personally here in just a second. So the next question I get a lot is, how are the chapters laid out? Well, the chapters are laid out in a really easy format. It is a lot of text, and honestly, it can look a little overwhelming when you first open the book, but don't let that scare you off. It's broken up into some really easy to understand sections. They always start out by talking about what is the big idea? Like, what are we going to be talking about as a whole? What is sort of our goal or our mission by the end of this lesson for you to understand? So there'll always be that section. Then the next section will be a story. So there was 2 different stories told within this first book. They're kind of a continuation of each other. So for the first 5 chapters, we were following this little boy and his friend. His friend is an unbeliever, and he was coming on vacation with this Christian family. And it opened up lots of opportunities to share the gospel and talk about different beliefs and different worldviews. The second story took place on an island, again with a Christian family and a secular family, and being able to share what they believe in different ways. We'll get more into that more in a second. But anything in this green border is the story format, okay? And then it continues each and every lesson, which definitely kept my kids engaged. There are little boxes that will have you stop and think about it, or maybe make a note of something. Then you will notice there'll be these little kind of informational pocket sections. My kids really, really love these. So here's one about the Great Pyramid of Giza, or here's one about phenomenal brownies. There's all sorts of fun things, but they're basically things that are around our world where they tie them into that specific lesson. Then after those little fun facts in the story, you will run into the main portion of the lesson. This is going to be kind of your meat and potatoes, so to speak. And it's going to take whatever the lesson is. So this first lesson is 7 ways to build on the rock, which is Christ. And it's going to break those down, each under their own heading. This makes it really easy to just read until your kids, need to take a break. And then you can stop and pick back up again. A lot of times we'll take 2 days or so to go through that main section. Then they always end it with, where am I building my life? And talking about different worldviews. I really like the fact that this curriculum does tackle this topic in this way, that it spends more time focusing on the truth than focusing on all the other things out there, but it definitely does address the different beliefs out in our world. And that's all there is to a lesson. So how did we use it? That is another question I get asked a lot. Obviously, they have a suggested schedule here in the front that would take you through doing this 3 days a week. And for the first semester, we did follow that schedule. We did read 3 days a week, and on the other 2 days, we did our own study on our order of worship, or what we do in our worship service, why we do it, and it was a really fun study to do in conjunction. However, when we finished it, I debated whether I wanted to add a different study in or whether I just wanted to go full-fledged on this. The kids were really, really enjoying this, and frankly, dividing it into 3 days made the readings kind of long. And so instead, I chose personally to just read each day and just read a little bit less and take it in a 5-day increment. So it's really flexible. It can work with you and your schedule. Just stop when your kids start to get fatigued and or when your kids start to ask so many questions that you feel like it's a good stopping point. Because honestly, that's usually when we stopped, is when we got into this whole big other discussion, and I felt like we rounded that out really nicely. There are student journals. If you guys are familiar with Apologia, there are student journals that you can purchase separately. And for this particular book, there is also, I believe, a coloring book that you can get. Now, we did not utilize those this year, and I'll talk a little bit more about why we didn't do that here in just a second. So what did we like about this curriculum? I love the fact that the lessons really did hold my kids' attention. They did a great job of sprinkling in those fun facts, different historical time periods, as well as sprinkling in things like even a few Star Wars references, which, if you know, in our family is always a big bonus. They really enjoyed the lessons, and I love the fact that it really spurred on more conversation. That was something that was really important to me, is I didn't just want a book that I could read out of and the kids would kind of tune out. I wanted something that sparked conversation, ways that we could practically apply it. So they talked about finding the biblical worldview and how we take everything we see and we hear and we filter it through the lens of scripture. And so with that, they used the example of a commercial. So then my kids were like, well, maybe we should start watching commercials and seeing what the worldview is. So then we did that as an extra activity that we added on. We would go through, and I had the kids watch several of the Super Bowl commercials, some of the highlights of those, and we talked about what is the worldview of this commercial. And it was funny how they could start to see that and what it was trying to push or what it was trying to show them by just watching a short commercial that had no talking at all. But now they're starting to see how different agendas and different worldviews are actually coming out and coming to play in these things. And they're also seeing what lines up with scripture and what doesn't. And that to me is everything. I also love the fact that it did introduce us to different cultures. Like I mentioned before, that second story in the last 5 chapters is set on an island, and there was a lot of fun cultural things. One of the families believes in these false gods and is doing all these things to try to appease these gods. And so that was something my kids were really, really interested in, and we try to be global focused family. So we love giving that global perspective to our kids and getting to introduce them to different countries and cultures. So that was really fun. I also like the fact that through both of those stories that they really did a good job of modeling what evangelism looks like. It's not just yelling in someone's face the truth about scripture, but it was coming alongside these families, coming alongside these people, loving on them, showing the love of Christ, being kind, answering questions, sharing the gospel for sure, but doing so in a way that I just felt like was very Christ-like, honestly. And so it was just really fun to get to see that and to model that with my kids. And I've started to notice many of the things we learned kind of subconsciously through reading those stories, I've seen my kids implement with their own friends, which is really, really neat. All right, so what about the things that maybe weren't my favorite or that you just need to be aware of? Okay, so we all come from different backgrounds, and some of these things may not apply to you, and I completely understand that. But I also know that many of you guys believe very similar to myself and my family, and so you guys are wanting to know, how does this fit as far as, is it reformed? Is it not? Does it have images of Jesus or not? And that's what the section's gonna be. So feel free to skip it if you're not interested in that information. But it does have images of Jesus. I mean, there's a hand on the cover. I went through and I noted every single picture of Jesus. And I put a count here for you guys. There are exactly 18 out of 250 pages of different information pieces where there is images of Jesus. So I did cover those up. If you want to know more about why we don't do images of Jesus, you can find that down in the description below. But I just wanted to let you guys know what I did appreciate about them is that they were all pieces of art. All of the pictures in here, for the most part, are works of art. And so you can see that. I think that was kind of a fun added bonus here. You can see a picture of Moses, and these are all different famous paintings and things like that. But it does have images of Jesus. So I didn't love it, that part, but I just post-it noted over that, and I was able to enjoy the resource despite that fact. Also, along those lines, is it reformed? I would say no. But I would say it's pretty darn solid. There was only a few points where I needed to adjust the wording, and more specifically in the very last lesson, which is why it was so important to me that I finished the whole book before I share with you guys. Sometimes I will share a review when I'm like halfway through a curriculum or 3/4 of the way through a curriculum, because you can get kind of a feel for how the curriculum is. But with Bible, I'm very, very, very picky about what I use, because I want to make sure it's accurate. I want to make sure that I'm teaching my kids along with our beliefs and what we believe to be true. And so I just spent a lot of time kind of trying to dissect that. The last chapter was a lot about the gospel, which is amazing, obviously. But some of the wording about, we just need to choose, and I don't know, it just didn't have all of the wording I would have chosen for talking about predestination, which just probably means the author doesn't come from that perspective, and that's okay. I was able to adapt that wording pretty easily myself, but if that is something that you hold to, you may want to pre-read those lessons ahead of time, especially that last lesson. And then I feel like there was one in the middle, and I wrote it down, and I can't find the piece of paper of where it is, but just be aware it might come up from time to time where you need to change some wording around that. The final thing that was not my favorite, but is definitely doable, is that they do use multiple translations of the Bible. I don't mind using multiple translations, but they do use one translation that I was not as familiar with, which was the ICB translation. They do use the New Living Translation as well as the ESV. I am not a huge fan of the New Living Translation. I don't know a whole lot about the ICB. I have to even look up what it stands for. However, we prefer to use ESV in our home. I did appreciate the fact, though, that anytime that it was any other translation than ESV, they always noted that to the side. So with those situations, I would either choose to pull out my Bible and read it out of the ESV, or I would read it out of the other translation, but I would read it as if it was part of the lesson versus quoting scripture, if that makes sense. It's a personal preference. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that is what we personally prefer. I hope this video has been helpful to you guys. Drop any other questions that you have down in the comments below. I forgot to mention that is the reason that we did not choose to use the coloring book or the student journals for this particular one, is there were so many images of Christ, because the whole topic is who is God, that it just wasn't worth it to me to kind of like rip out pages or whatever. But we are planning to use the student pages for the next year, which is Who Am I? And learning about what God says about who we should be as children of God. So I will let you know about how that goes and give you an update on that. So be sure to subscribe so you can follow for more information. But overall, I would really give this a glowing review. I really appreciated it, and I really appreciate the conversations it brought into our home and how biblically sound it was. Talk to you guys next time. Bye.